to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's my good friend Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I was very, very hungry before I entered the green room, I guess, pre-show room before we start this. And now I'm feeling pretty good. That beef jerky hit the spot, and I was a little panicked because I was like, I don't think I've done a podcast like totally hangry. Like usually I'm pretty good about being like filled or at least somewhat filled. So I was a little worried how I'd take it out on you, but now I'm doing very, very well. So I'm ready to rock on a great slate of games this week.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you got the energy because this is a great slate of games this week that we are going to get into. A lot of games worth previewing week 9. We're going to talk about all the big games this week, really 4 huge ones that we're going to dig into. So sometimes on this show, we've got a bunch of different categories and a bunch of different ways we try to hit the week. Not so for week 9. No gimmicks necessary because of how good this slate is. So that is on the docket today, those 4 games that we're going to talk about. But before we hit those, a lot of news that we have to get to today / want to get to today because it was a monstrous week. That starts with the Raiders deciding at like 3 a.m. a couple nights ago to fire their head coach and GM 25 games into their tenure. And it was funny for me because I was so out on this Raiders team. I was just so out. On Tuesday evening, they announced that they were not flexing them out of the week 10 game. And I was joking. I was like, I can't wait to watch none of that Raiders Jets game. And Mina and Barnwell were giving me shit saying like, oh, you'll watch it. No, I won't watch it. They are the definition of a no-fly list team right now. But even for me, even as somebody who just could not stand another second of watching this version of the Raiders, I still was not expecting them to fire the coach and the GM 8 weeks into their second season on the job.
Right after, and also they had so many close losses last year, and like I think he got threatened. He got his feet raised to the fire pit a little bit last year, and then I think walked off a little bit. But I also thought maybe these next couple of weeks, winnable. I believe they have they have a couple like decently games they could be in, and then maybe we'll see after that. Vic did a great job. Vic Tafer, I should say, he covers the Raiders, but he did a great job of just like how bad this was, and then when we get to kind of pick and choose what we want to talk about, what we want to focus on. So we kind of, like you said, no fly list. It's not part of it. It's like taking a walk. It's not a plate appearance. Don't have to think about it. It's nothing happened there. And so now I actually have to focus on it and actually break down all the steps and all the missteps, I should say, that happened one after another. The Chandler Jones saga, just everything. You're kind of like, oh my God, that happened. Oh my God, that happened. Oh my God, they did that. That's right. And when they signed Jimmy G, it was kind of like, really? And that kind of like just indicated everything that this regime was just kicking the can, trying to be Patriots West, even though it's 2023 and no one else is doing that right now. So it felt needed. It was just a very abrupt one, especially happening on Halloween night, I believe. And I got to use a great Simpsons meme on Twitter. So I'm glad they did it on Halloween night, at least for me on the West Coast time.
Before the season started this year, someone said to me after we previewed the Raiders, like, your Raiders preview was so lazy. You spend so much time digging into all these other teams and you just kind of hand wave the Raiders. And I don't mean to be dismissive when I say this, but that's what they deserved. This team at this tenure, it was so disjointed what they were trying to accomplish. And the Jimmy G deal, exactly like you're saying, to me, epitomizes it. It's like, you're telling me how to feel about you. You move on from Derek Carr. You signed Jimmy Garoppolo to this sort of contract. 2 years ago, you made the playoffs before you guys got there in a way that team never should have. You bought into that at least a little bit and used that as urgency to go sign Chandler Jones, to go trade for Devontae Adams, when in reality, you were nowhere close to that sort of team. Last year, you realized that, unfortunately, and now you have no off-ramps whatsoever. Right. You've got a couple of expensive veterans that you invested in. You have no underlying talent on the roster because the previous regime drafted 0 workable players over like a 5-year stretch. And then you go out and you sign Jimmy Garoppolo to this middle of the road veteran quarterback contract when it does absolutely nothing for your short-term or long-term interests as an NFL franchise. So again, none of this is surprising. It always felt like it was probably careening toward this place. It just got there a lot faster than I assumed it would. The question now, what the hell happens? Where do you go? Are you going to be bad enough to potentially be in the quarterback market this offseason? I think the answer is maybe if you keep going on this trajectory. Aiden O'Connell is now starting for them. It's just such familiar territory for an organization that has been completely rudderless so often over the last 2 decades. And I wouldn't say for so long, because there were moments during the Gruden era where it's like, okay, I guess this sort of makes sense, even if they can't draft anyone. But to be back at square one again with no answers and no discernible path forward, it's a deflating, disheartening place to be if you're a Raider fan, but that's exactly where they are again.
It stinks that a team with Devontae Adams and Max Crosby and even guys like Josh Jacobs and like Michael Mayer for me, is it Jacoby Myers, even Hunter Renfrow, and or was maybe Darren Waller last year when he did come back before they traded him. It was just this team always just felt sluggish, even just when you watch them on offense. And then that's the thing is you're getting Jimmy G, and it's like that's a move to like be like I'm assessing everybody, or we just want someone to implement it, or that's a caretaker for a really young team. That was no, when you look at the Raiders roster, it's like you guys have all these weird mix and vets and nobody to build around. So they never planted their foot. It was a team that wanted to win now, but it was what it was needed. What this franchise needed was to reset or rebuild or reload. And they're just not the people for that, not the caretakers for that.
The Jimmy Garoppolo thing, this is the last point I'll make about this. There's been a lot of discussions this year about, well, why do you need to separate what the quarterback does in the offense from what the quarterback is? If it's working, that's all that matters. You need to separate it when it becomes time to value these guys in a vacuum. Jimmy Garoppolo was top 5 in every single advanced quarterback stat in the NFL last season when he was on the field for the Broncos. He comes here. You've seen what it is.
He's one of the most efficient quarterbacks ever.
Like, yes, one of the most efficient quarterbacks of all time. You look at every single one of those numbers. He was top 5 in EPA per dropback. They were fantastic. Look at what he's been so far for the Niners. That's why it's important to do this. Yes. That's why it's important to extricate what the quarterback is from what the surroundings are. This is a perfect example of it. It is a different soapbox to get on, but I do think it's important to point out. I'm glad
you did, because it's like that's what's so tough. Like we do the quarterback ranking stuff, and I think some fans, everyone's guarded about their guy, their quarterback. I get it. But so many times when we rank a quarterback, we talk about a quarterback, we're saying like in a net neutral team, like just a team that's like, who would you build around?
Some people don't understand the value of that exercise. They don't understand why you're doing that. This is why you do that.
Oh, I mean, there's discourse about Trevor Lawrence's fantasy football stats. And it's like that is the separation of like what we're talking about. And then when you're talking about with just the system and everything, it's like we're talking about what you would build around with these guys. And so when you look at that Jimmy G or anyone that's in the Shanahan offense for X amount of years, that's why we always want to bring that up and bring up that caveat.
All right, let's get to the other big news of
this week. They didn't flex out of that game, by the way. It's like they just had such a good one too. I know, sorry.
I mean, I think there's probably some sort of protection going on with the games that are good, and you have the Jets fan base, whatever.
New York fan base.
Guess what? For us, and again, everyone misunderstands how Sundays go. During the Sunday night game, we are prepping the Sunday night show. So if that game is just completely terrible, I could just work.
It's better.
It makes it much easier for me. So I don't mind it at all. If Bryce Huff or Max Crosby or whoever has a monster game, I can go back and watch it on Tuesday. That's the beauty of how this all works. Let's get to the rest of the big news from this week, and that is everything that happened around the trade deadline. Obviously, a couple days ago, but we haven't had a chance to talk about this stuff. Let's start with what the biggest move of the trade deadline was from a pure return standpoint, and that is the Bears trading what is going to be a very high second-round pick, most likely, to go get Montez Sweat from Washington. I'll let you talk about how you feel about this first.
As far as the player, the value, or what? Everything?
The trade in general. From the Bears' perspective, how do you see this move?
I see it as a team that needs players, but also it is a very expensive move to make. But also I come back to is very hard to accumulate these types of players or find these types of players. These types of players being a very good edge rusher or better. You're not going to get the elite ones. I mean, like the elite guys. Those just don't happen. There's no Reggie Whites in the late 90s.
You're not really going to get the elite guys at any position anymore in free agency. They're not going to get there. And pass rushers specifically, I think even less of them get to that point.
So that is the number one argument for this. That it is hard to find these guys. Also, the 2024 draft class is not a great edge class. So that might be some nearsightedness of just this offseason and not future off seasons or future team plans. But how I look at it, I grade this as like a B-. I don't love it. I like Sweat for a lot of other teams. Like the Falcons were a contender for him. I like that move a lot better just on their timeline. But I also come back to the Bears need players. They need dudes, and you're not going to find someone at this tier or better. You can maybe take the chance in the draft and maybe just say, oh, or we could take that draft pick that's high second rounder and use it elsewhere. Those are still coin flips. So I think I just come back to some of that one in the hand, two in the bush type of thinking, that I'd rather take the known asset at this price at a position that I value and everybody values, as opposed to maybe the unknown. And I could see both sides of this argument, though.
I get some of that. Not a lot of these guys that are quality pass rushers hit free agency. He's 27. You're still going to get the next 3 years on the edge of his prime. You're getting a guy who's been a consistently available and consistently impactful player at a position where it's hard to find those guys. I get all of that. I still think that paying the 35th pick in the draft potentially and a market rate extension for a player of Montez Sweat's caliber who is good but not great is a really high premium to pay for that sort of certainty. They need to sign him to an extension to make this worth it, right? They need to.
Right.
And I think they're going to. The problem is him and his agent also know that they need to sign him to an extension to make this worth it. So there's a very good chance that it's going to come in similar to some of the other near the top of the market edge rusher extensions that we've seen. Rashawn Gary this week got $24 million a year. If I were Montez Sweat's agent, I would walk into Ryan Poles' office or give him a little text message and say, hey, did you see the edge rusher contract that was handed out this week? That's the one I would like, please. Montez Sweat, while a good player, is not the sort of player that Rashawn Gary is. So you're giving him that sort of contract and giving up the 35th to 38th overall pick to do it. And to me, there just aren't that many guys in the NFL who are worth that sort of pick plus an extension. There are examples of it working out. A.J. Brown, obviously, is the best example recently. DeForest Buckner, I think, was an example that worked out pretty well. We can argue how the Dolphins feel about the Bradley Chubb trade. That's probably the closest approximation to this. It was the 29th pick in the draft plus $22 million a year. So it's probably what you're looking at. It's a lot to give up. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is a decided win for Miami. I think that some people looked at that and said it was probably an overpay. Yes, you can tag him potentially, but you want to have that be the tone and the discourse between a guy you just gave up the 35th pick for. You want to piss him off like 3 months after trading for him. That's not great. And I get that, okay, you could miss out on all these guys in free agency. If you just waited this out and you just said, let's sign the top edge rusher in free agency, there's a chance that Josh Allen, Danielle Hunter, Chase Young, Brian Burns, which is a pretty good group to start with, by the way, all get extended or franchised. And then you're left with nobody. So you're left with nobody. Then you have the 35th overall pick. Same thing with Chase Young or Chase Claypool last year. It's like, well, if we wouldn't have done it, then the Packers would have traded for him. Okay, then the Packers would have traded for him. I think being willing to live with some of that uncertainty is worth it in some of these scenarios. I don't think it's going to be a disaster like it was in the Chase Claypool scenario because he's a good player. I just think it's really, really hard to get a positive return on this sort of investment when you give up a pick and the contract for a player like this. That's just how I feel about it.
No, I know. And that's the market, though. And that is, there's property value and there's market value. And that is why the markets exist and guys get overpaid all the time. So if Montez Sweat is getting, how much would you pay Montez Sweat? What do you think is a fair number?
$18 million a year.
Okay. So say it's 23. So $5 million overpay.
But plus the pick. The pick. That's the thing.
What would you use the second rounder on? Like, what is that like need after you have 2 top 10 picks, most likely?
But you could use a second rounder on anything, and that guy's cost controlled for the next 4 years. So it's not just
you need players like that.
To me, it's you're putting the car
keep
before the
kicking
horse.
the can. Never plant your foot. Never plant your foot.
I don't think you need to plan it this way.
I know. I don't like this for the Bears, but that's the thing. That's the other side of this is that you need dudes. I mean, obviously, if they don't sign him, then it's like, no, this is a F. But if they extend him and all this, you need players. And this guy's a very good player that you're not going to like build around him, but you need plus players. They have none. That's what this Bears roster is so
huge premium to pay for a good player. And it's not going to be something that torpedoes you. It's not going to be something that torpedoes you. Right. Yeah, they have space. So they just could have signed the best edge rusher available in free agency.
If they would come to Chicago and then you're over. Do you think those agents
already overpaying this guy? You're already overpaying him because of the leverage he now has.
You're doing a what if about the free agency. So I'm saying like this is done. It's done. This is now your trend. This is now your timeline.
But what you've paid to get it done is so high.
Okay, say Danielle Hunter, who's played what? We have 1 full season in 5 years. Okay. So you have Danielle Hunter. All right. We're going to pay him $24 million. If they know it's a market too, their agents know that
I
if
would
he's
rather
the
do
only
that
one,
and keep the pick. Yes.
oh, no. No. I mean, like, I love Danielle Hunter, but it's, I mean, you need, like,
I
this
would
is not
rather
the first
pay
round.
Danielle
This is not
Hunter
number
market
8.
value. It's still 35. It's still a really good pick. It's still a very valuable pick. I just think it's going to be very
I love how
hard.
we treat picks as coin flips until they're not. Now they're a sure dollar.
But it's the 35th pick in the draft is a very good pick. It's a very high pick.
Mhm.
I would rather pay Danielle Hunter, whatever you have to pay Danielle Hunter, and keep the pick than do what they just did. But there's a chance that doesn't happen. But again, it's worth living in the uncertainty for me. It's just worth it. I would rather accept it. I just don't think this is the type of move that good teams on this timeline make. The Bears are not competing next year. They're not.
That's why you can't apply apples to apples with every team. It's every team is just going to be such a different situation. Like I said, I like this for the Falcons. If they're drafting maybe in the later part of the second and their timeline, their everything, like it, the grade would be better. But I can understand the line of thinking, even if I don't love it. And that's why I think when some people are just saying this is the worst thing that they've ever seen in their lives, I'm like, okay, really? I can understand the arguments for it, even if I'm not like 100% behind it.
And so can I. I just don't agree with it. In the end, when I hear those arguments, I'd rather the Bears have not done this. I think you just roll with the uncertainty because even if I understand the arguments, ultimately I don't agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
The other guy on the move from Washington who went for a 3rd round pick somehow and is younger and arguably more talented, Chase Young goes to San Francisco for a compensatory 3rd round pick that is going to be at the end of the 3rd round. This just feels like a no-brainer for the Niners.
Yeah.
Like there's zero risk involved whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for them, this one, yeah, especially that price. This was another one where it's like, I understand, again, injury risk does matter, but also it's like, are you watching what he's doing this year? Like, and I get it. And if, hey, maybe you make it contingent on a physical. And then, okay, there we go. Then, okay, that can give you like the fail safe. If, okay, the training staff's like, hey, it's not looking good.
He has to pass one for a trade anyway, doesn't he?
Huh? Yeah, for it to go through anyways. But I'm saying, but like, really, teams are gonna like, I don't know. I don't know. I thought I was pretty rich on him, like, because I was like, yeah, I understand the argument for like maybe the Jags, but it was like, really a 2nd rounder? No one was really willing to throw a 2nd rounder at this guy. This guy's playing super well right now, and he's got a lot of pedigree. So I didn't really understand other teams, but I loved it for the 49ers.
And on the Chase Young thing, yeah, there's some downside with a 3rd round pick if you can only franchise him. But even the Niners, I don't think will franchise tag him. I don't think they're in a financial position to do that. So there's a good chance that if they don't keep him, he hits free agency. But they also probably won't go ham in free agency. So you're probably looking, if he walks, at a compensatory 3rd in the 2025 draft. So if all you've done is you've swapped the same pick 1 year earlier.
Yeah.
For some teams, that's not the case. For a team like Washington, they're likely going to spend in free agency next year. So letting these guys just walk in free agency, you're probably not getting the comp pick back. The way that the Niners cap works, there's a very good chance they will get one. That's why I just think that it's a very low risk, very high reward type move for the Niners.
This was perfect for them. A+. Like, there's no, like you said, there's no real downside for them. Like, that's why, again, I couldn't believe other teams weren't just, and maybe they aren't positioned to do that. Again, like we said, this is easy for the Niners to do, but yeah, just thought it was, this is crazy. I can't wait to watch him with the 49ers defense. Like, it is going to be fantastic. Hat on a hat in the best way possible.
This is one of those situations where it's so nice to have the infrastructure that encourages these sorts of bets on players.
Yeah.
And when you have Chris Kasurek, it's just like, okay, let's just get him in the building and let's just see how it goes. And maybe it's just a rental. Maybe it's more than that. But no matter what, we know that we're going to get the best out of him because of what we've built here. And I think that that's really encouraging. This isn't the exact same because obviously it's a different sort of investment, but it reminds me of the DeJuan Jones thing with the Browns this year. It's like, all right, let's just take a swing on this dude because we've got Bill Callahan. So why not? And I just think that it's one of those hidden benefits to having really good coaches in some of these specific areas. And I think this is another example of that.
When one of your position coaches is a guy and you don't have to worry about him getting poached, you're like, oh yeah, he's not head coach material. We're fine. It's like the best thing ever. Like, talk about Patriots guys with Scarnecchia for years. They know exactly the type of guys. He just told them the guys he liked. It was probably the easiest thing ever because he worked them out and goes, yeah, that guy. All right, 4th round. All right, cool. Got him for you. It's like, that's great when you could just do that year after year. So no, great example. Getting Randy Gregory was just like another, just like, okay, why not? Why not? This guy's got pedigree. Yeah, he might not be able to play every snap, but why not?
Yeah, it's one of those moves where they're pushing because they have a championship caliber team, but it's not like they're leveraging themselves for the future. This is a very low risk type move.
They know they have an undrafted free agent quarterback right now. Like they know they could do this stuff.
On Washington's end, by all accounts, Diana reported this.
My bad. My bad, Mr. Irrelevant. Sorry to cut you off.
He's making that same sort of money.
Same money. My bad. Sorry, Brock Purdy. Mr. Irrelevant. My bad.
The conversation this week around Washington, Diana reported this. Don't think it's news to anybody. Ownership involved in some of these decisions. This is just about building for the future. Yeah. We're just accruing assets. We know what we are. We're in reset mode. I don't think it's completely a one-to-one connection point because the guy they hired to oversee their analytics department, his name I can't recall at this stage, he hasn't even started yet. So I don't think this is hey, Josh Harris is here. We're processing the Washington football team. But I don't think it's not that.
Right. I think they're moving. I mean, I actually love that they're ripping the Band-Aid off. Like, as opposed to, no, we're not trading Derrick Henry because he's a Titan for life type of thing. So I appreciate people willing to know where they are. We talk about that. Self-awareness is like something we're always like, yes, it's great when a team has that. It's awesome. It's so great. I still don't got it, so don't worry.
Let's stick in the NFC West. Seattle making a very aggressive move to trade a 2nd-round pick for Leonard Williams. Kind of a fascinating trade from both sides. Obviously, the 2nd-round aspect of this is a 2nd-round pick because the Giants took on all of his salary to make this possible. From the Giants side of it, no-brainer.
Yeah.
No-brainer. It's a guy now going to be on his 3rd contract. You're not close to competing. You're already going to pay this money anyway. So why not just do it and get the 2nd-round pick back for it? Yep. I think that is, the Giants, there's been some weird parts of their process, specifically quarterback related. I also think other parts have been fine. I like this. This is an entry and okay, yes, they understand what they're doing, which I think there's been more of than people probably realize with the Giants. Just the big mistakes kind of overshadowed that. So good move by the Giants. What do you think about this for Seattle though?
It's like, they like a type. They have a type, like, with the Deron Reed and Jones there that they signed for agency. So my kind of that interior tweener, the 3-tack, 4-eye, depending on the scheme. So basically he's a defensive tackle or a 3-4 defensive end. And I remember even when he came out of college, that's exactly what we had trouble with as when we were grading him with the Falcons. It's like, what do you guys see him as? Because he was talented, but he just didn't know. I think that matches what the Seahawks want. They want kind of more tweener guys because they vary up their fronts a little bit. And so I like it. I like him giving him another kind of thumper. He's got a little pass rush juice and they need that. And just another good body to throw out there in the interior, another plus size body as well.
It's a lot to give up.
It's a lot.
The difference is if you're Seattle, we talked about this last week. You're looking around at the rest of the NFC and the rest of the league.
Right.
I don't think you are unjustified in thinking, why can't we do this?
Yeah.
Why can't we? And so I'd be curious why Leonard Williams over a 2nd for Chase Young.
Yeah.
An edge rusher after losing Uchenna Nwosu. But I think they wanted to add somebody to the front, and they did because they probably think we have a real chance at this thing. And I don't think they're wrong in thinking that. It's certainly aggressive. It's certainly rich.
Yeah.
But it's unlike the Bears, at least it aligns with the timeline.
I was just going to say,
that's why I appreciate that.
That's the difference. And the salary cap thing is very important. You're trading contracts too. So like that's an important part of this. It's funny to me watching the Seahawks defense transformation under Pete Carroll, different play callers, of course, but they went tweeners before, but it was like pass rush first tweeners. And now they're kind of going, no, we want like pushers and bruisers and thumper tweeners. So it's funny that they've kind of transitioned to like, oh, we want all these bendy kind of speedy guys that can run twisted games. So like, we're going to run those twisted games, but we're like clotheslining you as opposed to chewing like a flip over you. So it's fun to watch a little transformation because they're kind of like one of those teams that's like watching that trend throughout Pete Carroll. It's like kind of reflecting what's happening in the league right now.
The Bills trade a 3rd-round pick, but get a 5th back in a deal for Rasul Douglas. So ultimately that shakes out to a 5th or 6th-round pick, depending on what sort of trade chart that you're looking at. A move that makes total sense for the Bills. after losing Trey White, I think they absolutely needed more outside corner help. We know about Kyer Elam's struggles. Dane Jackson has been the other outside corner there. They needed something. I think this is a move that makes all the sense in the world. Stylistically, he fits with what they are. He's under contract for next year. So if Trey White is a little bit slower to come back, he's on the roster now. So I think another low risk, logical move for where the Bills are, what their needs are, and what they're trying to accomplish this season.
Another B+ player for that defense. That's what the Bills defense does. They just have a lot of good. They try to have no weaknesses, and this helps out. It makes total sense. And also for the Packers too, basically on their weird timeline that they are being forced upon this year.
Let's get to the games of the week. We're going to do this chronologically because lucky for us and lucky for everybody, all 4 of these games are at different time slots on Sunday. So let's start with the game kicking off in Frankfurt, Germany at 8:30 my time on Sunday. The Dolphins and the Chiefs. It doesn't get much better than this. This is a potential battle for the number 1 seed in the AFC. When we get down to that, we have 2 offenses that one is just playing all systems go this year in Miami. Even with some of their struggles, you still have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce on the other side. What is the number 1 thing that you were looking out for when this game kicks off on Sunday?
Oh man, I had to break this down both sides, to sift through. But I would say with the Dolphins offense versus Chiefs defense, what's so fun about the NFL is like what the Chiefs defense is going through is that they play the Broncos and they're heavy personnel, heavy formation, condensed, a lot of running, heavy play action going to the Dolphins offense and going from the mile high air to Frankfurt. And having to do that's the NFL. There's no breaks. So you're just getting thumped against the Broncos. Now you're going against the speed, spread it out. But then also the next play, run an I formation, Dolphins acid trip offense. And it's kind of funny, but watching that they have the Dolphins and the Broncos have similar philosophies, but they get to it differently. Pound the rock and run play action. But it's cool. But I will say that it's this Chiefs defense that we got to gush about recently. Last week, it feels like 20 years ago. Oh my God. That was last week. It's a great example of why you have to be able to pivot. You brought up the great stat last week about the dime personnel and the base personnel that the Chiefs defense can get to. And I think that's what's cool about this version of this Chiefs defense is that they can get to heavier personnel or they get lighter and get to different looks out of maybe the same structure. So I really think that it's going to be an interesting race to Spags leans into the blitzing. Do the Dolphins catch it? It's a gash or B gash, maybe at its finest. And I have some more stats about this, but that's really what I can't wait to watch is that matchup of all things.
I went back and I watched the Eagles play against the Dolphins because I was curious what their blueprint was defensively because they had some success against Miami where other defenses so far this year have not. And you're playing against Miami, this high-flying, explosive passing game that does a lot of its damage on early downs, right? They want to get you into certain looks in 21 personnel, and they want to throw the ball on you on first and second down. They don't even want to play on third down. But what the Eagles did that I thought was interesting is that they were matching those 21 personnel looks with base defense, because one of the things that's made the Dolphins so dangerous this year is their ability to run the ball against lighter boxes on first down. You know, the Dolphins against nickel personnel on first and second down this year, we're averaging 0.2 EPA per rush.
Mahomes.
That's Mahomes. That's like Mahomes. That's like diet MVP level Mahomes in terms of EPA per dropback. That's how dominant they were in those situations. So the Eagles had what I thought was an interesting solution. Like, all right, we're going to play base defense and 2 high coverages behind it. We're just going to put a roof over you with our 4 DBs playing 12 to 15 yards deep, but we're going to play with 7 guys in the box. So it's almost like a disjointed defense when you watch it happening. The Chiefs are very equipped to play that way. We talk about how comfortable they are playing in base defense. They don't have, I think, the same level of talent across the board up front that the Eagles do, but they still have some pretty darn good players up there. Yep. And they can play with 3 linebackers in the field. Even with Nick Bolton hurt and Willie Gay kind of a question mark to play, they still have Chanel, Tranquil, the ability to play that way, and they play a ton of 2 high coverages behind those looks. So I think that model that we saw from the Eagles actually makes a lot of sense for the Chiefs to try to deploy on early downs.
Yeah, it was so interesting diving into. I'm so glad we went under the hood on him last week, is because, and that was my biggest takeaway was Spags loves these DBs and he loves his personnel right now. He knows that they're smart, they're sound, and he can get to a lot of funky looks out of them, and all of it out of the same quarter shell.
Mhm.
So it's the same look every single play, which I think is super interesting. So his blitzes, and I brought this up last week, was he used more quarters shell blitzes than he did cover zero, and that's a reverse or inverse of the trend that he had the previous years. Usually just be cover zero, cover zero. The Chiefs have generated the more EPA out of the blitzes this year than any other defense. 42.8 EPA, total EPA when they blitz. Next highest is the Steelers, 26.4. The league average is -2. They've generated 42. They are so good blitz. They've only allowed, this is always the thing, it's gash or be gash with Spags because he'd run those cover zero looks. They've only allowed 4 explosive plays when they blitz this year.
That's
4.
crazy. That's a huge stat.
Last year, they gave up 16 through 8 weeks, and they already had their bye. So 7 games instead of 8 games. So 4 times as much the last year. We've talked about it, is these guys tackle better. They're sound. It's more zone blitzes, but also all those quarter shells change the looks they get to after, because he'll just do some funky stuff. What is one thing that Tua can struggle with, or really just anyone in the Shanahan offense, is changing post snap picture. Is because he's like, hey, this is where I go. 1, 2, 3. That ball has to get out. They have to, the offensive line isn't great. This ball has to get out in 2 seconds. But if you totally change the picture on them with DBs that are good and know how to do this, that's why I said that it could be gash or be gash, which I think is just gonna be awesome to watch. What, like, how they chuck it and what Spags throws at him, to what junk ball pitching that he does.
Important to bring up the injury issues that the Dolphins offensive line specifically is dealing with. We know about Teron Armstead, Connor Williams still dealing with that groin injury. So definitely something to keep an eye on with that matchup, because there's a very good chance, again, the Dolphins are at a supreme disadvantage up front. The last thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to ask you, you wrote today for Yahoo about your midseason awards. And you mentioned Tua as kind of one of the top 3-ish MVP candidates in the league. And last year, I think that there were times where we were a little bit skeptical of the role he was playing and how dynamic and explosive the Dolphins offense were. It was a lot of point and shoot, a lot of like, hey, I'm giving you this answer, you take it. But you putting him in that conversation this year, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, like he 100% right now belongs in that discussion based on the way that he's playing. And some people probably wouldn't look at the results we've seen so far and who he is and see a different sort of quarterback providing a different sort of contribution to who the Dolphins are this season. I do. And I think you do as well. Yep. What about the way that he's played this year to you is somewhat of a differentiating factor and makes him deserve more credit with the way that the Dolphins are built than he might have deserved last season?
Actually, Brock Purdy, of all people, is what has maybe appreciate Tua a little bit, and maybe this Dolphins offense even more. Last year, I got kind of bailed out when I did these midseason award articles, is because Tua was hurt. So yeah. I didn't. Sorry guys. He's missed time. So now, really, I didn't know where to put him. I knew I was going to put him in my top 5-ish, and I was like, I have to give him a mention. And watching him this year, and again, this is a continuation of maybe what we started with the show with, and talking about separating the system and the quarterback. Well, this is one of those where the quarterback is perfect for the system and vice versa. And I think that is why I appreciate this more and why I want to reward it more. Purdy even has better stats than Tua across the board, but Tua has just been hyper efficient. He understands the offense. He gets the ball out so quickly. And yeah, if I'm building a team, I'm not taking them with the top guys, but how he's playing this year is fun. It's really fun. It's explosive. It's efficient. He's going to the right place a lot of the times. Yes, after, if the first read's taken away, some things could go askew. And that's why I kind of held him off for making him the MVP or even the runner-up. But I do think how he is as the trigger man of that offense, I was trying to compare it in my article to like an F1 driver. How do you separate the F1 driver from a car that's the best car? And I know that's kind of F1's a little more popular now, but that comparison for me, or a jockey on a horse, what is the jockey good, or is Seabiscuit just freaking awesome? I think right now it's one of those perfect pairings where the offense, of course, is ridiculous, but Tua is doing such a good job that I had to reward him. And I think it's just his quick operation has been very impressive this year, and how he pushes the ball and has the ball sometimes to throw those throws. And again, whether is it Mike telling him that, Mike McDaniel telling him that, I think some of it though is you have to credit Tua for doing it.
I totally agree. And there were moments last year where I'm like, He's merely the driver. He's merely the driver. And I have not felt that way this year.
That's how I feel.
There's a couple numbers that I think really illustrate this. Last season, in 13 games, Tua had 18 big-time throws, according to PFF. 18. He has 19 this year.
Right.
He already has more this year than he had all of last season. He finished 16th. And this is just one stat, but I do think it's a telling stat.
But that's how it feels. That's exactly how it feels.
Yes. The amount of tight window throws that he's making, the amount of like, oh man, like just dropping balls in hole shots, and combined with the aggressiveness that he's showing, that's one element of it to me. He was 16th, by the way, in big time throw percentage last season. He's number 1 this year.
Yeah.
So it's not just volume. He is number 1 in the NFL. And it feels like that when you watch some of these balls he's fitting into more difficult windows than last season.
Yep.
Teams were making him push the ball outside the numbers last year, late in the year, because they didn't think he could. He has shown an ability to more consistently do that this year. He still doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but I think he has answered the bell on some of those questions we had about him. And I think that extends to play creation.
Yeah.
You know, he's not the most creative quarterback, but I do think he has shown more ability to play off schedule, to get things that aren't there, to make plays out of the pocket. So the big time throw propensity plus the ability to make a little bit more happen when it's not there. I've been so much more impressed with the player that he has been this year than I was with the player that he was last year.
That's it. That's how I feel. And it's the offense is reflecting it. When the teams are first taking away maybe the first answer for him, I think it's so impressive too. It's like sometimes I call RPOs a training wheel because they are, but I watch him on an RPO and going when number one, the Patriots game was really good for this. Patriots taking away one thing and then he's just going, okay, 1-2. And it's only a 2-yard gain, but it's not a negative. And that's sack avoidance, in its own way. He's getting rid of the ball for a 2-yard gain. That is what I'm like, that's the stuff I like. So why am I not rewarding it? So shout out to Tua. It's been a fun driver for this offense right now.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where I think that people want to believe that we see guys a certain way, or I don't want to have us be treated as a monolith. I see guys a certain way, and I just refuse to change the way that I see them. Like, that's what that guy is. My priors are all that matters. Right. I just don't care that much. Like, if a guy shows me different things, I'm so happy to look at him in a different light when he shows me I should.
One game to come off Jamar Chase takes. I was like, okay, never mind. He's awesome. Never mind. Yeah, my bad. It's like, I'm fine with it. Yeah.
It has been fun to watch him kind of be a slightly different version of the guy that he was last year. And I think it makes them more dangerous. Talking about dangerous offenses, the Chiefs absolutely deserve mention in that right now. I think it's been a little uneven. They've had some stops and starts. The one area where the struggles seem very real, where if we're really going to boil it down and say, okay, this isn't just a 1 or 2 game blip. This is a huge change compared to what we've come to expect from them. Their running game has been awful this year.
It stinks.
They are 31st in rushing success rate this season, 31.7%. Only the Bucs have been worse. They're 29th in the percentage of their runs that go for negative yards. And I was looking at it. I want to say, like, all right, maybe are there a couple tweaks here situationally where they could be a little bit better? Into 6-man boxes, into light boxes, they have a worse rushing success rate into those than they do overall. And they're 28th in the percentage of their runs that go into 8-man boxes. So they face some of the lightest boxes in the league, but even when they get those, they cannot run the ball. Yeah. So I think Patrick Mahomes will probably be fine. I think their passing game, even with the receiver questions, is probably going to be fine. What the hell is going on with their inability to run the ball right now?
I know we both in the pre-show were both looking at that. Even when I wrote my Mahomes case, my MVP or my awards article, I was like, their run game stinks right now. He's doing a lot. You got to understand he's carrying a lot with this team right now, as he always does. But that was why their offense was so awesome last year, is the run game got so good, and so efficient, and even explosive. I think Pacheco has kind of become the bad side of Pacheco. He can bounce stuff too much. He's a little too chaotic. His vision's never been great. That's why he went so late. That's why he wasn't very productive in college. He's explosive, but I think that's where some of that has hindered when they have blocked it well. I also think sometimes they just got caught. I think they're running a play and running a run look. And at the Broncos game is a great example of it, where the post-snap picture changes, the safety rotates down late, and then it becomes a disadvantageous look. So I think that's a little bit part of it. And I just think it's one of those where it's like just some general mishaps. Just a guy falling down, a guy missing a block, not getting a cutoff and everything. They are working in 2 new tackles. I get that. But I think that's just what it is. It's just that inconsistencies from everything. And I think sometimes they're not running into the best looks. And maybe some of it's just they're experimenting. The Chiefs get to do this because they're good. And that's a little annoying, I think. But they do. So maybe there's a little experimentation, but it has been disappointing. This could be a very good get right game for them. But if they can't do it against this Dolphins run defense, then it's like, oh boy, who are you going to do it against then?
So the Dolphins play with the lightest boxes in the league.
Yeah.
So theoretically, this should be the team that you would be able to run the ball against. The Dolphins have not been a great run defense, but it's been a concern against the Broncos. The Broncos were doing a lot of 5 down kind of penny fronts with one linebacker off the ball, stopping the Chiefs from getting double teams. And the Chiefs, I'd have to look back and see if this is something they used to do a lot more of, but they're doing a lot of things where there's no one attached to the formation, where it's just the 5 offensive linemen and 11 personnel spread out. So it's just those guys. The Eagles do a lot of this, and the Eagles are very successful doing this. But the Eagles can mow you down that way.
Yeah. They're doing it a lot 2 years ago.
And okay.
And actually this last year I was so excited because they stopped doing it. they leaned away from it. So yeah, but they kind of got back. I don't know if they were like against the Broncos, they're trying to be light and spread it. Like you don't know what the game plan sometimes why they did it, but yeah, it just seems odd.
The one other frustrating part about this Chiefs team that I wanted to look up and find a stat about, and I was so glad that it aligned with how I see them. The Chiefs have run 13 plays inside the opponent's 30-yard line on 3rd or 4th down with 2 or less yards to go. Okay. I know that's very specific, but think back to some of these scenarios. The Rashee Rice shovel pass, the double pass that they ran against the Broncos the last time they played them. All the stupid little bullshit short yardage things that are driving me insane. Okay. They've run 13 of those. They've been successful on 5 of them. They have a 38.5% success rate in that exact situation. 3rd or 4th down, 2 or fewer yards to go inside the opponent's 30-yard line. 38%. The league average is 60%. They've been the second worst team in those situations.
That's your goal.
31st in success rate.
In short yardage, 60% is your goal. Like that's the baseline that you try to get to. Half of that.
So what you think you're seeing with the Chiefs in those scenarios, you are correct. There is one team worse than them.
Dolphins, right?
No.
Oh, the Dolphins are terrible in short yardage, but who?
It's even more obvious than that, and it's even more right than that.
Is it Falcons?
It is the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kindred spirits right there.
So right.
Oh,
in those scenarios, inside the opponent's 30, 2 or fewer yards to go on 3rd or 4th down. The Jags are 1 of 8.
1 of 8.
Unsuccessful.
And the Jags are winning.
1 of 8. And they're winning.
Wait until that sorts out. Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
One more thing to look at.
One last thing for this is that I want to see if the Mahomes and Chiefs, not just Mahomes, but the Chiefs offense gets into empty a lot. Their last matchup against Fangio when he was with the Broncos, they went to empty like over a dozen times. And the Dolphins have faced the 3rd most snaps of empty this year. This is what a lot of people do against these defenses because they go too high, yada, yada. But the Dolphins have only let up 3 explosive plays on 55 snaps against empty. So
interesting.
It's tight. So I'm curious if they try to pop it anywhere with the Chiefs.
So bringing up the empty thing is interesting because that was one of the other things I noticed with teams playing against the Chiefs this year. Empty kind of gives you more answers before the snap. That the ability to kind of be,
especially against Spags.
And the ability to be anything, right? Out of that quarter shell, you can be anything. Empty makes you a little bit easier to decipher, and that's why a lot of teams do it. Teams, the way they've been playing the Chiefs this year, have been making it harder on them. They're playing last year. Remember how much man the Chiefs were playing against? So much man coverage, like near the top of the league in man coverage rates, because teams were challenging those receivers. Still, you're playing against Patrick Mahomes and giving him the answers to the test. It doesn't matter if you don't respect the receivers, and they shredded teams. So this year, teams have started just not giving them the answers, even if they don't respect the receivers. On early downs, they are seeing quarters coverage at the highest rate in the entire NFL. So that's what teams are doing. They're just playing quarters. You can't run the ball. We're just going to make it difficult on you in terms of giving you answers before the play even starts. And we just don't trust that you have the talent to beat us right now. And I do think in the end, they'll probably be okay, but that has been the blueprint. So
Yep.
whether that continues to be the blueprint this week, worth keeping an eye on.
They're still like 5th in DVOA.
Exactly.
They're
Exactly.
great. They're a good team.
Next game here, the Seahawks and the Ravens. Absolutely love this game. Absolutely love this game. Prepping for this, I had such a good time. And so let's start with the Seahawks offense against the Ravens defense, because in my opinion, and this is something we talked about earlier today, I think you can absolutely make an argument that this is a matchup between two of the best coordinators in the NFL right now, in Shane Waldron and Mike McDaniels.
Yep.
That wouldn't surprise anyone on the Ravens side of it. The Ravens are number one in defensive DVOA. They've been one of the best defenses in the league. They've been suffocating all year. I think people might be surprised to hear us talk about Shane Waldron and the Seahawks offense in those terms, though. I tweeted something earlier this week about how much I loved watching the Seahawks offense and how great of an experience it's been so far this year. And the amount of people from the Seattle area who are just like, what are you watching?
Right.
Really? You think this is good? You think this offense is good right now? Is truly shocking to me after like really digging in and watching this team play. Why are people maybe not fully comprehending why Shane Waldron has been one of the best coordinators in the league this year and why the Seahawks offense really is one of the best offenses in the NFL?
Another red zone turnover team that or red zone or just turnovers and red zone woes. So again, that's going to feel unsatisfying, even if the stuff is good. Why they're so good? Well, one, they have great players and they have a lot of good players. That really helps. A lot of personnels they can get to, or at least the personnels that they major in are very good. They are so sound. They are so thoughtful. They are so, I stole your term there, thoughtful, but they are so just understanding of game planning and understanding of their players' strengths and the opposing team's weaknesses. And just they run a little bit of everything, but nothing is sloppy. And there's results. Sometimes I get on the show and I talk about this, and then you look it up and the team scored like 18 points a game. Hello, Falcons. But it's like, no, but like when I watch this team, it's like there is results, and that's with some unluckiness. And on top of it, they have a quarterback that is playing the position of quarterback as good as anybody right now. And so
there will be people who think you're insane for saying that, by the way. They're people are just cannot believe that you just said that about Geno Smith. And I wish that I had any sort of pushback against you whatsoever, but that is exactly how I feel when I watch him right now. It's exactly how I feel. And I get they're playing against the Browns.
Yep.
They're driving the ball in the 2-minute drill and he throws an awful interception. It's like, God damn it. But you have to be able to live with some of that because his aggressiveness is what's driving you. His aggressiveness and his ability to kind of push the ball into some of these precarious situations is one of the reasons that you're such a good offense right now. They are 5th in offensive success rate. 5th. And I know the points have not been there, but that is because of some ill-timed turnovers and some red zone woes. Down to down, everything is tied together. The ways that they help out their offensive line and protection are so smart. Chips with the running back, really good running back. Guys that are good in protection like Zach Charbonnet. Yeah. Some of the designs where there's a tight end in the backfield and he's slicing back across the formation to seal it off. The ways that they're helping their offensive line that's been banged up, and then the ways they're really starting to unleash their skill position talent, like some of the designs on 3rd down against the Browns when they know they're in man coverage, and just the stacks with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and you're running off the corner to create some space for Lockett coming back underneath. There's so many different things that it's all tied together in a way that makes sense. And I know that there's meat left on the bone right now. And I know that if you're a Seahawks fan or you're just a casual fan watching this that's confused, you don't understand why we're talking about in these terms. It may not happen this week against the best defense in the NFL, but I truly do think that they are going to break through in a way that is going to make people realize how good they really are. And both Shane Waldron and Geno Smith are huge reasons for that, even if they're not getting the proper credit for that right now.
It's like that Seahawks Lions week 2 game. I wish it was like last week or something. And people go, oh my goodness, Geno, that offense. Oh my God, look at what they're doing. But it happened early. So now we realize, oh, these teams are good. Not you and me, buddy, but it's the designer plays.
Again, I have no agenda. I have zero agenda whatsoever.
Just enjoy football.
I turned on the Seahawks Browns game on the plane. I downloaded it on the plane. I'm traveling this week for family reasons. I downloaded it on the plane and I watched the game over a course of like a 2-hour period. And we're about to land and I fold my laptop up and I put it back in my bag and I'm sitting there thinking and I'm like, man, that was nice. Like I just had such a good experience watching that offense. And that's how I feel when I watch them. There's no agenda. There's no previously planted flags with takes on any of these guys. I just really think they're doing a good job.
When we watch a lot of teams and when we watch a lot of shit and then you watch something that's inspiring and good and sound, it's like really, like you said, you have a grin on your face. You're happy. And like even their gimmicky stuff, like we've talked about the sidecar formation, that's still sound.
Where they put like two backs and a tight end in the backfield or two tight ends and a back in the backfield.
Two guys next to each other.
Weird. It's three guys like in a line together. It's
and they do
it's
full
very
house
different
stuff.
than a lot of things people do.
That stuff's just, it's all sound. It looks gimmicky. It's sound. It's like, it's not just they doing it just to do it. They have a running back, Zach Charbonnet, and kind of like a midline split. I don't know how else to describe it. He's not like in the backfield, but he's not like in a slot and he's 5 yards back. And they have him chip. And what they did was they changed the chip angle on the Browns pass rusher. And then the Browns pass rushers used to the chips. And he's like, oh, it's not coming because the running back's not right in front of me. And then here comes Zach Charbonnet just whacking him from the side. The designer stuff on third down, so thoughtful. It's so they're doing stuff to beat certain coverages that they watched on film all week. And I love when I see a team do that. I'm like, oh, like the stack alignments you talked about, all those types of things. And I would talk about just their detailed game planning. When they played the Browns last week, Myles Garrett will come off, I think, after the first, like he'll go like 2 series and then come off, or he alternates series or something like that. He comes off the field. The first play that the Seahawks run, that Myles Garrett's off the field, they run a heavy, deep play action. You're not going to run that with Myles Garrett on the field because he'll blow it the F up. So they run it. They're like, oh, he's off the field. Okay. We used to do this with Von Miller, but it's like, again, that's attention to detail because you need to tell somebody to note that and then have a package of plays to beat that. Myles Garrett's off the field. They run a deep play action. They run a zone read with Geno because they knew Myles Garrett would blow up a zone read. You can't run it at him. They run to the left, which they would never do if Myles Garrett was on the field. Again, thoughtfulness. And then Geno playing the quarterback position. Just one example. He uses a hard count to unravel a Browns blitz. And again, that's quarterbacking. I'm aware of a cadence. I told everyone to hold on for the hard count. Points out the blitz, or changes the mic for the offensive line. So telling where the protection to go. Browns bring a blitz. Rather than the Seahawks run a high-low. JSN's on a crosser. Tyler Lockett's on like a dig bender type route. The Browns know a crosser is a great answer against a blitz. That's a hot. Geno knows that. The Browns know it. Browns drop Myles Garrett to blow up JSN, which would be on the crosser. Geno doesn't even look at it and hits the high route to Lockett, even though he's hot because it's a blitz against 5-man protection. That is quarterbacking. He just created a double out of nowhere where everybody else would take a 2-yard gain. The 101 answer would have been 2-yard gain. So those are my examples of a smart, sound offense and an awesome quarterback right now.
So people are going to say, all right, well, why do they have these stretches against the Browns specifically where they're struggling to move the ball? The Browns actually deployed something that I think is a smart thing that more teams would maybe benefit from doing. They forced the issue against the Seahawks team in a way that very few teams have this year. So the Seahawks this year, it's kind of an esoteric stat, but stay with me. They have faced 19 dropbacks. They've had 19 dropbacks when teams have blitzed and played man coverage. That is the lowest rate in the entire NFL. 19 times that's happened. Teams only blitz 37% of the time when they play man against the Seahawks. That's the 28th highest mark in the league. That's what the Browns do. Yeah. The Browns play man and they blitz. Yeah. So Geno faced more of those plays last week than he had all season. He's 9 of 19 when teams do that to him this year because those are high volatility plays. And he, on those plays, he's trying to hit the home runs.
Yes.
So there are going to be moments or stretches where when teams are doing that, he's trying the high difficulty throws, those one-on-ones down the field, where maybe you're coming up empty a little bit more often, but you're going to hit enough of those in the long run with his arm and this talent and his ball placement where I think it ultimately is going to normalize. I will say, I think more teams should do this against them.
Yeah.
I think more teams should try to dictate like this to them. The fact that they've faced fewer of those plays or they've had fewer of those plays than any offense in the league, I think that's a mistake. And I want to see if the Ravens try to do that a little bit.
And I want to see, because probably a lot of teams are petrified of like, okay, we got guard Lockett, JSN,
exactly,
Metcalf, and these tight ends man to man.
Totally.
And then the Ravens are probably, they run man. They'll run man on passing downs. They did against the Lions, they did against Cardinals. They've done against, they run everything. Everything. The Ravens defense runs everything, most simulated pressures of anybody, and just every coverage that you could think of. So that's why it's fun to see a real well-coached unit go against a real well-coached unit that have strengths against each other too, which is going to be fun.
I think that you'll see a similar sort of game plan for the Seahawks that we saw with the Ravens against the Lions.
Yeah.
I think the Seahawks and the Lions are like the same team.
They're kindred spirits.
Like they have a lot of similarities. The most early down play action of any team in the NFL, the best early down play action teams of any teams in the NFL. They play with heavy bodies to get you in heavy bodies. And we saw the Ravens against that Detroit team do everything. They're sending the corner off the edge, but it's a simulated pressure. They're playing tons of different coverages behind it. So that's the type of game plan I expect to see from Baltimore. The other last thing to mention with the Seahawks and both the good and the bad, their protection has been a problem at times this year. Even if they're helping out the backup tackles, of which there's only one left, the guards are also banged up. They got Anthony Bradford in there as a 4th-round rookie, and he's consistently struggling. Geno is consistently making the most of those plays this year.
Mm-hmm.
He is 3rd in pressure to sack rate in the NFL this season. 2 of the guys around him, he is in the Mahomes-Allen tier right now in terms of the amount of pressures that are turning into sacks for the Seahawks defense.
That's the stat.
He has been fantastic
yes.
at mitigating that stuff. He made multiple plays out of structure against the Browns last week when pressured and having to just make something happen. You combine that with the work that he's doing from the pocket, I really do think that there are some fantastic days ahead for this group. That being said, this might be a problem again against a Ravens front that is playing some very good football.
Yeah, some great. I was trying to describe this kind of front matchup, and it's like 2 sawed-off shotguns going against each other with the interior of with Damian Lewis at guard against Matabike, and even Michael Pierce is playing really well right now at nose tackle. But yeah, this is. Charles Cross is good too, by the way. Oh yeah.
He had some really good moments against Myles Garrett.
Yes. That was a great battle. And again, but that's the thing. It's not when you, and this is not their game, but like Kyle Shanahan with Trent Williams, he'll never give him chip help ever. Like maybe once in like a couple weeks. That's what's great about what Waldron and the Seahawks do is that they make, like you said, they mix it up. It's like not every time. And then once in a while they chip help. And I just love that. Just change it up on them. But again, I would say the Seahawks going against this defense, like, Patrick Queen, try and put him in a bind, make him make a mistake. That's how you have to get after him because they're so smart and they run so much. And when you want to run a lot on your offense against a team on defense that wants to run a lot, you have to be sound because that's how the defense gets you. Oh, what's the answer against cover 0? What's the answer against this simulated? I'm not sure. Sack. Oh, I'm not sure. I'm going to throw it in there. Picked like that. That's like one interesting aspect about this is because it's sound, but there's a lot of it. So I think it's gonna be awesome. I just don't know what else to say. It's like, this is just varied offense versus varied defense, and they're both aggressive. And I think that should be just rewarded with eyeballs. So everyone make sure to watch this game.
Other side of the ball, we don't have much more time to talk about this game, but just, I thought it was very funny last week watching the Ravens play against the Cardinals and seeing a team treat Lamar Jackson like an elite passing quarterback, not treat the Ravens offense like an oddity. Right. So typically when you see like the Lions and the way they played against the Ravens, a lot of single high, a lot of stacked boxes. We're worried about them running on us. The Cardinals played quarters coverage on like 35% of their dropbacks last week. We just talked about it with Mahomes. That's how teams play against Joe Burrow. That's how teams play against the Dolphins. So watching a team treat the Ravens like an elite passing offense rather than an elite running offense was very interesting to see. The Cardinals dropped 6 times in that game last week against Baltimore. That's the most times a team has done that in a game since week 8 of the 2020 season against Lamar Jackson.
I know.
So that shift, I think we're seeing it start where teams are going to start treating them differently. The nice thing about the Ravens is they can run it down your fucking throat if you want to play them that way.
Gus Bus. That's why they're going after Derrick Henry. Oh my God. Could you imagine that? Just super Gus Bus. Oh yeah. The Cardinals doing the funky 3 coverage shell look. Like the Iowa State look. I don't even know how to describe the 3. It's not because I want to say 3 safety look, but it's not 3 safety bodies. It's like this the net coverage. But it was funny because the Cardinals used Budda Baker as like a monster back. It was pretty fun. But also Tariq Woolen, little struggles a little bit with quicker receivers. So what do the Ravens have? They got some quick receivers that run slants a lot. So that is one matchup that I actually like for the Ravens, even if I like Woolen. So it's like that's one I'm looking on. I want to see the Seahawks blitz them. That's what I would lean to. Seahawks are a great blitzing team. They're third in EPA on blitzes this year.
And
But
he has struggled at times when blitz, but he's been better this year.
he's
So
been much
I
better
think
this
that
year.
they just have better answers, but I think that's a good thing to point out. Last thing to
Pick
mention
your
about this
poison,
game,
but that's the least damaging poison you could pick.
Ravens are -6.5.
Yeah.
That may seem like a big spread to people where the Seahawks are a top 10 team by DVOA. They've been a good team this year. I think we're starting to see the markets and even people in the general public start to understand the Ravens might be the best team in the league. They're number one in DVOA. They're the best 6-2 team that DVOA has ever measured. And when you combine what they've been doing on offense with what their defense looks like, that number doesn't seem that crazy to me when you really kind of step back and consider what this version of the Ravens is.
They're a great team. It's just their work, even when they're negatives right now, I could tell it's mostly on offense. So the defense stuff is really good. I could tell why they're doing it. It's not like where I'm like, oh boy, what are you doing there? So that's exciting. And how Lamar is playing right now, that's who was runner up in my MVP poll, by the way. Or my
I have no issue with it whatsoever.
Yes. How he's playing right now. Yeah. And again, another team that's had turnover bad luck. And so an injury bad luck. If that normalizes, oh my God, like this team's so good.
Let's get to a huge matchup in the NFC East this week. The Dallas Cowboys playing against the Philadelphia Eagles in the afternoon slate of games. It doesn't get bigger than this in terms of division races. I mean, we got our first matchup between these two teams. Kind of a weird one because when you went back and I was trying to figure out what to study with these teams, last year, their second game, Jalen Hurts didn't play. Their first game, it's so early in the season last year. It's a different defensive coordinator. I was all right. I'll watch the Cowboys offense against the Eagles defense. Well, we get a different defensive coordinator for Philly. There's different offensive coaching.
Dak was out the first game last year.
Dak was out the first game last year. So there's not a ton of data points. There are fewer than you might think there are for teams that should be familiar with one another.
With the same head coaches. Yeah. With the same head coaches and same, like most of the same characters. Yeah. And I totally agree with you. It's a great example of like how you have to like match tape with what you expect to get. I go like, hey, I'm going to look at this game to translate to this game. So I'm curious. This was pretty fun to go over with you in the pre-show as far as like what our points were, because I thought we were pretty efficient when talking about it.
The Eagles offense against the Cowboys defense. I just don't think it's that complicated. And you want to make it more complicated than it has to be sometimes. The Cowboys this season are 30th in early down rushing run defense success rate. They've always, not always, relatively, their run defense has been worse than their pass defense under Dan Quinn for the last couple of years. But when I say that, I mean they've been middle of the road as a run defense and elite as a pass defense. Well, now it couldn't be more disparate. They're elite against the pass. They're a bad run defense. And it makes sense. They don't play base defense. They don't. They play nickel to everything or dime. They've continued to do that. The difference is one of their starting off-ball linebackers right now, Marquise Bell, who's been excellent in coverage, weighs 210 pounds. So you're essentially playing dime to everything right now if you're the Cowboys defense.
He wears 14. He's a 14. DB. He's a DB in my brain. Come on.
He wears 14. So in this world that we're living in, you have to be able to run the ball on them on early downs. Guess who loves to run the ball efficiently on early downs? The Philadelphia Eagles. If the Cowboys can stop them and get to third down, the Cowboys play a shitload of man coverage. That's what they do on third down. The Eagles have a very simple plan when they play teams that play a bunch of man coverage. What percentage of the Eagles' targets against man coverage do you think A.J. Brown has gotten this season?
It's a lot. And I think my guess earlier was 54%, 52%. I almost nailed it, I think.
It is 50%. 5-0. Out of every 2 plays where the Eagles face man coverage, A.J. Brown gets the ball thrown to him. That is the highest mark in the entire NFL. The highest mark in the entire NFL. There's only one other person above 40%. There's only 3 players above 35%. He's at 50%. So when it all comes down to it, it really does feel to me like this is about being able to run the ball, and do they have an answer for A.J. Brown when we get to third down man defense situations? That's it. That's all I got.
And that was all I had. The Eagles are going to pound it, and Van Der Esch is out. And what was the nickname for Van Der Esch? The Makalele, because he was helping all the guys up front to do all the runaround and all the twisting and games and chaos that they like to do. So I don't have much to add. I know Jaron Curse is going to be on Dallas Goedert. I can tell you that matchup. I can tell you that that's going to be a fun one. But yeah, I want to see if maybe they move Parsons inside, but again, this was Van Der Esch dependent, was they would move Parsons as the off-ball linebacker, but automatically blitz him on first and second down. So I'm curious if they maybe do that to funky some things up, but not much more to add, buddy. That is exactly it. It's man coverage and how do they stop the run? That's it.
I'm excited to see who plays AJ Brown in those man cover situations. Is it Deron Bland? Is Bland going to be the one that's on him? Bland has been fantastic. He has been so good this year. So that's a matchup to watch however many times we get it on Sunday is Deron Bland against AJ Brown.
It makes me sad that Diggs isn't in. I know. Sorry. I think another thing, but that's
the fact that the guy who has come in for him has played as well as Deron Bland has is pretty fucking impressive.
That's what makes me really sad. It's like, really? They got Gilmore, who's been fine too. He's been exactly what you expected him to be. So yeah, kind of a bummer.
On the other side of the ball, what are you looking for? Cowboys offense against the Eagles defense.
I think anytime you're going against this Eagles defense, it's going to be how do you attack the spine? That's the weakness of this defense by design. I mean, just how they invested it. And what's nice about the Cowboys is they can move CeeDee Lamb inside. That's what he prefers to do. I mentioned on the Sunday show that they've been targeting him on the outside a little bit more, and that's been fun. But I think that's more of an aspect of, okay, that's the weakness of this defense we're going against. So let's put him on the outside. Let's put him at the X. Let's put him at the Z. Now, this is a slot game, and he blew up on the Eagles last year.
Yes.
Again, different DC, but same family, same weaknesses. So I think this is going to be a big CD game. I'm also looking, and maybe a Jake Ferguson game as well, because of how the tight end for the Cowboys operating over the middle. Look for a double move on James Bradbury once the Cowboys get inside the 30. That's going to be like my little kind of quasi call. I'm going to be like the guy that calls the home run before it happens. Double move on James Bradbury on inside the 30-yard line. That's going to be Bradbury jumped on a couple things and nothing happened. And I'm just curious if that gets caught, if that gets taken advantage of.
What I want to see is how do the Cowboys think they should attack the Eagles secondary? And I think where CeeDee Lamb lines up will give you the answer to that question. Right. So that's what I'm looking for. Another thing that I think is worth just checking out here. We talk about how the Cowboys' tendency to kind of dink and dunk and play underneath can be a negative against some teams. When you're playing against the Niners, they just swallow that stuff. The speed that they have at the second level makes it really difficult to play that way. Against the Eagles, there are potentially opportunities in that area of the field. The Eagles right now are 26th in EPA per drop back against passes between 0 and 5 air yards. So just short passes, they're 26th. They've given up
I know a quarterback that likes to throw those.
There you go. They've given up the third highest explosive play rate on those plays. So it's about 10%. So they have given up a lot of short completions.
Tyreek Hill averages 10% explosive catches per route. So it's like that. You're basically Tyreek Hill. That's what all those short throws can become anyway. Sorry.
So just something to watch because, again, this team does not have the sort of team speed at the second level that a team like the Niners has, where it's really bad to try to dink and dunk a team like that. Maybe a little bit more effective in this particular situation. But again, a fantastic game and a game with huge implications.
Yep.
Last one here. The Sunday night matchup between the Bills and the Bengals. One we've seen before, but this feels different. This feels different than what we got last year when these two teams played against each other in the playoffs. And where I want to start with that is that it really did feel like Cincinnati did such a good job last season of sending Josh Allen into frantic mode early. Von Bell had 4 pass rush snaps. Mike Hilton had 6 pass rush snaps. Jermaine Pratt had 4 pass rush snaps, where they're sending guys from the second level, but they did a lot of simulated pressures behind it. So they're just trying to get him off schedule. Why I think that mindset is interesting for this Bills team is that I feel like we might have seen a turning point with the Bills last week. The offense we saw and the style of offense we saw against Tampa Bay, where it's a lot of tempo, they're spreading you out, and he's just having very quick answers to the blitz, where he's just getting the ball out of his hands quicker than he did at any single game this year. I think they're better equipped to handle a defensive coordinator that's trying to send him into chaos mode than they would have been at other times this season. And that's why I think this matchup is so intriguing.
Yeah, I compared it to him going deeper into madness, goes down the river, It's trying to find his Marlon Brando down the river. But I really think that we talked about in the Thursday night recap. It was that I really do think they stumbled into this personnel grouping with their version of a death lineup, depending on the running back out there. But a Dalton Kincaid, the running back, Khalil Shakir, Gabe Davis, and Stephon Diggs. And I think how they were patching that together, Kincaid's not a good blocker, but they RPO'd it and they made it work. They made his kind of weakness work that can usually be the hindrance of having a non-blocking tight end. And now they have two receivers that complement each other, and Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir. What's nice about Khalil Shakir as well, he can line up in the slot or outside Stephon Diggs, so they can move him inside or out. So it's a nice like the synergy there. And you can put Gabe Davis at the X. You can block with Gabe Davis. Khalil Shakir is a scrappy blocker. This is something. It's like, it's funny. We talked about the different looks they can get to, and it was like, ooh, 12, ooh, 21, ooh, 13. It's still 11. It's still 11 personnel, but it's just the configuration of who they're putting out there. And you're bringing up the blitzes. What Josh Allen was doing last Thursday was so just him, again, playing quarterback. And like I was talking about with Gino, running the tempo stuff, pointing out blitzes, changing protections, doing all the adjustments, all the cadence stuff he was doing. Thought it was just like fantastic quarterback play. That's why he ended up becoming my MVP, not just because of that game, but just everything he's done this season, at least for the midway point. So I think, again, this would be a fun matchup because, like you said, the Bengals are equipped to get after Allen, but I do think he is now better equipped to answer it.
I just love if you're going to spread it out, he can just see things coming quicker. He just has a better sense of where the pressure is going to be coming from, and he has answers to it. I mean, we talked about this all the time. Teams that play in these condensed formations and use a decent amount of play action, it's just so easy to blitz them out of some of those looks because your DBs are playing closer to the ball. So if you're going to spread things out and just make it easier for him to identify who's coming, he can just pick you apart. Mm-hmm. And so watching him have the game in the palm of his hand, like he did last week against the Bucs, they are so dangerous when he can be in that sort of mode. And I just think that flash of him in that world, I want to see more of it. And we'll see what the Bengals can do to force him out of it. I think that becomes their biggest charge on defense.
And it's another game that it's a challenge or another check marker, checkpoint into these guardrails that we think the Bills offense has, which is the guardrails against Josh Allen's chaotic mode, bad way. Josh Allen chaos mode, good way, is one of the most dangerous things in all of sports, not just football. But the bad way can cripple your team, especially when your defense is not the elite unit and they're more of a patchwork unit that you're hoping to be average-ish right now. That's how I view them anyways, maybe above average-ish. But I think that that's what's so great is this run game that they're getting to. They can pound it down your throat a little bit, but they could do it from light and heavy looks. This versatility, these guardrails, like we said, but again, you have Josh freaking Allen, and letting him unleash and playing confident is one of the scariest things you can go against, even if it's against a defense that could be funky.
Well, so we were talking about this earlier today, that it's such a good job of kind of leaning into sight adjusts and hots and having answers to those blitz looks. Do the Bengals try to do enough stuff from a simulated pressure world where they're dropping guys into some of those hot adjustments and sight adjustments where you can get them once or twice? Do we see a pick to a dropper in a game like this? Do we see somebody dropping into one of those things that he double clutches for a second and he's a little bit more uncomfortable than he would have been last week against Tampa when it seemed like he had every single answer? It's
also a big difference of Lou Anarumo's simulated pressures and Todd Bowles. We're actually bringing 5 or 6 guys. Yes, it's not simulated. Yes. This is the real thing, guys. We're actually blitzing you. So that's those side adjust stuff. I'm glad you kind of jogged the brain on that, because that's, again, showing Josh Allen control. He's pointing those out. If you see Josh Allen doing like the 2-finger point or just 1-finger point, and he's pointing out to like the DBs, he's telling his receiver, the inside receiver or receivers, hey, if this guy comes or these 2 guys come, you have to adjust your route. It's a sight adjust. So that's a great point to bring up, because that's a great I know what you know what I know kind of thing, because that's what Lou Anarumo will get you with. But also another thing is Bengals are not great against QB scrambles, because their DBs and linebackers are so well coached and so smart, and they change so many coverages post snap, their eyes are outside. They're not looking at the quarterback. So Josh Allen's a pretty good scrambler. If you guys didn't know, he's really good at it. So something I'm also going to be looking at and probably betting on the over yardage Josh Allen rushing.
We talk about the Bills potentially turning a page and stepping into a new world with some of the stuff they were trying last week. The Bengals have already done that in what we've seen their offense deploy over the last few weeks. What are some of the wrinkles that you've seen from Cincinnati and some of the change-ups that you've seen that you've liked from that coaching staff over the last several weeks here?
Yeah, you see a lot of bubbles and flats to Jamar Chase, which I think is a great answer to, hey, let's get the ball to our best player. But those count as RPOs when it all comes down to it, which whole nother argument. I always hint at this. One day I'll talk about my argument about these being called RPOs, but Joe Burrow has attempted 23 pass attempts on RPO plays this year, according to SIS. He's 20 of 23 for 121 yards. So he's pretty damn good at them. Last year, he only attempted 26 in the entire year. He already has more yards throwing on these than he did all of last year. He threw 2 picks on these last year. And so they're leaning into that, which is helping their run game. We talked about their pivot to the spread run game last year out of the gun. When they want to run the ball from the gun now, this is just the natural. If you're going to play quarters or cover 2 against us, this is the answer. You're putting the apex defender, the nickel, the slot guy, you're putting him in a bind. Do you play Jamar Chase and go try to tackle him? Ask Isaiah Oliver how that went. Or do you scream in and play the run? Like that's what you're doing. And the Bills have Teron Johnson, which I think he's a great player. So that's a really fun matchup. And then also the other thing is that they're adding more motion when they throw the ball this year. He has 94 pass attempts when there's motion. He had 133 all of last year. So they're doing a lot of the same stuff, but it's stuff they've kind of leaned in before, but then they're just increasing the stuff that's, okay, we got to do this. Let's change the picture a little bit on it. So really good stuff from the Bengals, but I think this could be such a good matchup and so much translation from what they had against the the 49ers the previous week.
And we already talked about the amount of under center stuff that they're trotting out compared to what they had previously this season and even previous years. And I just think this is all product of him getting healthier, them kind of cranking up these dials even a little bit more. The whole playbook is available to them. So we're really getting to see what they wanted to be coming into the season for the first time. And it's fun. They've got a lot of levers that when they can pull them, they are a dangerous offense.
Well, I know it's smart to put Jamar Chase on a bubble, and that sounds so simple. They had a 3rd and 1, and Burrow, they had a zone bubble. Everyone runs zone bubble. Everybody, high school, college, everybody. Burrow looks out at the 2 blockers and Chase. He looks at the defense. He makes a check. Okay, they read the zone play, which would have gone for about 4 or 5 yard gain. He's like, I trust Jamar Chase with 2 blockers and against 4 defenders than I do us running for 1 yard against this 49ers defense. And Chase got 10. He broke 2 tackles and got 10 yards on it. But it's like, that cracked me up because that was a truly like, Burrow went, I'm giving it to my best player, whatever. Because it's not a bad answer. I threw the ball to my best player is always a good answer.
Is Jamar Chase the best short yardage back in the league?
Yeah.
You've always joked that the first guy has never tackled him. So is Jamar Chase the best short yardage back in the NFL?
I think he is. He might be up there with Gus Bus. It's Jamar Chase and Gus Bus. Although I did make fun of Oliver. He did get him once. I didn't tweet it because it ruins the canon that I've created about Jamar Chase.
Last thing to mention here, we'll see if Rasul Douglas plays. If he doesn't, I do think that outside matchup against the Jane Jackson, whether it be T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, something to keep an eye on. Also, Linval Joseph is a member of the Buffalo Bills. So much respect to the way that Linval Joseph is handling this. He rolls out of bed in November every year now and gets like $2 million to play the rest of the season. I love it. That just a man of Linval Joseph's constitution, let's say. As a man who has also been heavier at various times in his life, that sort of life where it's like, you know what? I don't want to put in any more work than I have to. I'll get there after Halloween. I'll do what you need me to do, and we'll go from there.
I love this whole mercenary D-line edge market that's been created the last 4 or 5 years. It's great. I love it.
Clowney just shows up whatever team he wants him on like August 38th, August 38th, August 31st.
Well, that's Mars.
Jesus.
Sorry, no, but we talk about it as like defensive line, easiest one to plug and play. So it makes sense that they could just get these guys. I remember the Eagles last year with Sue. Just come on, be a plus player for us.
Last thing we wanted to hit here before we get to 4Screen and your picks for the week. It happened. Falcons have benched Desmond Ridder for Taylor Heineke. Taylor Heineke will be starting for the Atlanta Falcons here moving forward. How you feel about this?
I don't know, man. I'm kind of disappointed. I say just get to the bye week. I still stand by that Ridder was moving the ball, but you just can't have the turnovers. It just can't. And I think you guys heard me on the show kind of maybe struggle to explain that kind of like both sides-ness I had. Cause I'm like, I loved a lot of things that he does. You can't turn the ball over though. Like you can't, it happens. Like it happens, it crops up. But if it becomes a thing, okay, why? And they're not in a place that can withstand that. And I do think the run game has to get picked up a little bit. Like not all the blame should be on Ridder right now. It still does nice things, but that's supposed to be the strength of this team, not throwing the ball, even if they have weapons. They're supposed to be explosive. So I understand it with the turnovers and stuff. I do still wish that even after they kind of gave him the kind of like, he's our guy for at least right now, that they kind of saw it through. Cause I kind of know what Heineke is. As much as I like him, I know what he is. So that's a little bit of the disappointment for me, that I want to kind of see Ridder get maybe a couple more chances, but it's tough. It's a weird situation, but it's not like they're going to a great backup vet quarterback either, even though I like him.
This is the end of the Desmond Ridder development process. They can
Right.
say whatever they want. When you pull a guy, it's very hard to kind of re-establish him as the starter moving forward. It's like, oh no, we still believe in him. It's okay. That's going to be hard. That's going to be a hard sell.
Belichick benched Mac Jones earlier this year, and he goes, "Well, I didn't want him to spiral," and he started the next week. And even though there's one day of like, is Zappy starting? And it was like, who's starting? But it was like he was just saying, I don't want him to spiral. He's back. He's our guy. So
yeah, even if they felt that way last week, Atlanta did. Not starting him, I think we've probably cut this off.
Yeah,
I said it after the show on Sunday. I said, you can't keep living with these games where you lose 2 touchdowns worth of EPA on sacks or 2 touchdowns worth of EPA on turnovers. And that's where they were. I don't think that's totally on Desmond Ridder. No. But I get the Falcons just looking at the entire complexion of their offense and saying, we need a change here. The direction that we're going is just no longer sustainable. I think Ridder is kind of an unfair scapegoat in that conversation, because I do think that there are more people to blame and there are more mistakes going around than just his. Yeah. My concern here is, does putting Taylor Heineke in for Desmond Ridder fix that? Because this is not a guy who's a safe option. He was number 1 in the NFL last year in turnover-worthy play percentage, according to PFF. You've called him Johnny Knoxville in a football
Johnny Knoxville
helmet.
playing quarterback. Yeah.
Like, this is not necessarily a guy who's just going to keep the train on the tracks.
Right.
So while I understand the Falcons looking at the chessboard and saying, we need to do something here to mitigate some of the downside risk we've experienced with Desmond Ridder, I don't necessarily think this is the solution to get them there. I think unless they shore up and tighten up a lot of other things that are going on with that offense right now, this is not going to solve all their problems.
I've been saying that I do feel like they're sitting on a big game, but that thing is, you still have to do it. Like, I could say that all I want. It's like a lot of teams are close. What you're saying too, it's not all Ridder, and that's been frustrating, is that some of their, like Chris Lindstrom had a bad game early in the season. It's like, really, the guy, I love Chris Lindstrom. I thought he's an all pro caliber player. And then it was just, even last week, I thought some of those sacks, when I was watching TV copy, I was like, man, Ridder, you got to get rid of the ball. You got to find it. And then I watch it. I'm like, oh, that's a protection bust. A tight end didn't slide across the formation and you're leaving Jeffrey Simmons unblocked, like things like that. So it's like, again, like you said, it's a little bit of a scapegoat stuff, but you still can't have the turnovers at the 1 yard line. And if that's your issue, like sometimes the perception is the reality. Even if when you're in that locker room with the team, if others are whispering about it, and then I go home and I talk to my friend or my girlfriend or anything, and they're like, man, Desmond had another turnover. And you're like, no, he's good. It wears on you. It really does. So like you said, it's like they looked at the change. I'm just a little disappointed because I do think there were signs of competency at that quarterback. Like I said, 18th best quarterback. I was not saying this guy's going to be like a Pro Bowl or anything, but it is a little disappointing that this is the timeline right now.
What happens next to me becomes the biggest question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Taylor Heineke will be the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons at week 1 of next year. This is the sort of team that I think is positioned for one of the stopgap veteran options.
I think
Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill. They have $50 million in cap space next year. I think overall they have a pretty solid roster. You know, they have an offensive line that's fully intact. We know about the weapons that they have. They've spent on defense, and I think have enough of a core of talent over there. That's why they wanted to go get a guy like Montez Sweat. They're going to be in a position with maybe $50 to $60 million in cap space next year, where if they bring in Kirk Cousins on a $30 million a year deal that has a $20 million cap hit next season, they become interesting. And I do think that is the more likely than not path for a team that's probably picking somewhere in the teens.
And I think it makes a ton of sense from all the things you laid out. They got weapons and they got a decent line. And I just telling you guys, it's like this sounds negative and it sounds like they still do some good shit. And I love it. And that's why it's more frustrating that they haven't put these performances. I could talk about process and soundness and everything. You still have to have the results, and you can't have busts. You can't have busts if you want to do all this cool stuff. So I'm talking about both sides of my mouth. I still like a lot of stuff they're doing. I still think they're a viable team to make the playoffs because they play in a terrible division. It's just been a little frustrating. And Ridder stuff has been very, very frustrating, at least for me.
To put a bow on it, I understand why they did it. I don't think it was a no-brainer. I don't think it's going to be a solve. I think that unless they handle some of these other issues that have been ailing them, then a quarterback change is not going to do as much for them as some people believe. My
one prediction is Bijan's going to get 25 freaking carries this week. So I feel like they're going to pound the freaking rock with Bijan.
Time for Win My Fourth Screen. Your guys' arguments for which sad, depressing, awful football game it belongs on the fourth screen of my multi-view this week. This one is from Ned Bartholomew. It says, hi, Robert. Do you like backup quarterbacks, vanishing hope, and mind-numbingly conservative fourth down decisions? Join me in watching Rams at Packers this Sunday. I'm a long-suffering Rams fan from the UK. Yes, a Super Bowl win doesn't stop you from being long-suffering if your team was the worst in the league for the first 11 years of your fandom and were so terrible there was literally no way of watching the games in your country. Okay, fair. And boy, has it gone downhill fast since February of 2022. I don't need to remind you how bad the Rams season was last year, so we'll skip ahead to this year. I go into September 10 months into a relationship with a girl who'd never heard of the NFL before we started dating. And against all odds, she actually wants to watch the Rams with me. I manage her expectations for the upcoming season, and somehow we pummel Seattle on the road. Puka Nacua is now her favorite athlete, and everything is rosy in the LA Garden. I try her out on some podcasts. She enjoys hearing Robert and Nate revel over the quality of passes Stafford is ripping every week. Yeah. At one point, she says to me, if these experts love the Rams offense, why aren't they scoring more points?
Hey, I'm trying. I'm trying to figure it out too.
It's a great question. I don't know how to answer it. Terrible kicking, bad luck with officials, extremely poor game management, all of the above. Now it's early November. The cold nights are drawing in the UK. And instead of celebrating our first anniversary, enjoying a bonfire night and watching fireworks, I'm forcing her to watch Brett Rippon duke it out with Jordan Love and making an ever thinner argument that it really is more fun to support the Rams than watch Travis Kelce being cheered on by Taylor Swift. So please join me as we fall to 3-6 and accept the Rams aren't a feisty team in a wide open NFC, but a vastly flawed outfit that will stumble to 6 wins and have to endure another offseason of retirement rumors from our quarterback, coach, and best player. Yours in pessimism, Ned.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's remember the 5th of November.
It's fun to see a Rams fan out in the wild. I dealt with a lot of them in college because I went to school in Missouri when they were in St. Louis. So I knew a lot of Rams fans, but do not interact with that many of them these days. So that was great stuff. All right, it's time for Tice's Touts. Your 3 favorite picks of the week. Before we do this, just a quick update on our wins pool.
Oh, yeah.
You were up by half a game.
Okay.
26. You are 26-13 on the year. I am 25-13 on the year. I stormed back last week with the Bengals win. A lot of good stuff happening. This is a huge week because we have Dolphins Chiefs, so the Chiefs absolutely could lose. We are playing against each other in Cowboys Eagles, and then I automatically lose one of the Bengals Bills games.
That's nice.
So,
big swing week.
But the Seahawks play the Ravens. I mean, there's a chance the Ravens lose. So we got a lot of high-level games with important teams in this exercise. So talking about, but I'm back in the game, baby.
Talking about the Falcons and then talking about Seahawks and how enjoyable it is to watch them, and then talking about like the Lions every week, even if they lost to the Ravens a couple of weeks ago. It's like, oh, how enjoyable. And it's like, all I just see is like pick 10 in that draft. There it was. Those teams, they're on my short list. The 4 team was the Steelers, so thank God I didn't pick them. But that's all I picture every time we talk about
the Dolphins and the Lions are definitely my biggest regrets. But I hope that the Chargers are getting right. And I just even if they go 9-8,
no one was happier to see the Bengals look like the Bengals on Sunday than Robert Mays. Nobody.
I swear to God, watching that game, I was so pumped because now at least there's a world where they can go like 11-6, and they don't torpedo my chances in this thing.
I got a team benching their quarterback. Great.
I'm really hoping that at least getting the Jags at, I think 9, right, is where I got the Jags.
Pretty late, yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping that we get like a 14-3 type Jags season that just carries me. But that's probably a little rich, but they could absolutely win a dozen games. So getting that at 9, I think, might be what ultimately salvages this thing. But I still think I'm going to lose. You have the better teams.
Well, yeah, don't do that. You see, that's what you did for 7 weeks, and all of a sudden, just every week. And I see Bauer. Robert's only a game and a half back. And I was like, oh no, Robert's a half game back. Oh no. So my touts, which aren't doing great either. But it's it wasn't 3 games is tough. Now I understand why Sheila used to always talk about that. He goes, can I pick every game? And they'll be like, oh no, because it's like you could be all right, but no, enough excuses. What is hard, actually, one more excuse. Can't pick any of the 4 games we broke down because that is like now in my ethics that I want to enjoy these really good football games. So a lot of schlock
to yourself. You could pick those games if you wanted to,
but it's not fun. It's like I just want to sit back and analyze it, or at least not the public know which side I'm leaning towards. So I picked a couple of nice little schlock fests here. I have Bucks at Texans. I'm taking the Texans -2.5. Don't ask me why. I don't think the Bucks are very good. And the Texans had a weird loss to the Panthers, but I just don't think they're okay and feisty. So I think that's evenly matched. I should probably take the points, but I'm taking -2.5.
If you were just like a friend of mine who was betting on this game in real time, I would be so worried about you.
I have to make it all count. I have to make it all work. Like it's like those. I'm already got 4 games I can't bet on. I got to make more of them count. Wait till you hear this next one. Taking the Raiders, who just fired their head coach at home, -1.5.
Honestly, I'm fine with this.
All right?
I'm fine with this because the
post-firing
dead cat bounce from the coach firing. We've always seen that before.
It's an angle I can get behind.
Right, but that one I support. That one's not as bad.
Thank you. I came around on that one. It's the angle I can get behind. The last one, speaking of the Chargers, on the road at the Jets, prime time. What could go wrong? Chargers -3.5 at the Jets. Offense sweet. I'm really curious. Chargers defense versus Jets offense is like it's opposite matchup of the week, but actually it could be matchup of the week, but in a different manner. We should do that one time. Just pick like kind of a pretty like one and kind of just really go over it. Get like a 30% Rotten Tomato score kind of one. So that one I'm really going with. Chargers -3.5 at Jets. So those are my 3. Take them if you want. Smoke them if you got them.
Lot of stuff to look forward to this weekend. Very excited about it.
Supercard.
Unfortunately, I mean, this is probably one of the best weeks we're going to have all year, those 4 games. So a little long today digging into those, but I think it was worth it. There's a reason we did. We will be back on Sunday night with our week 9 recap. So please be on the lookout for that live on YouTube. You can come check it out. We'll not be having a Thursday Night Football recap this week on YouTube. I'm traveling for there's a death in the family, and I appreciate you guys' understanding. So we'll not have a Titans Steelers recap. So if you're looking for that, that is the reason why. Appreciate your guys' understanding. Appreciate Beller and Tashawn holding it down earlier this week on the feed when I was out. We will be back on Sunday. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.